first entered it. So that was about 4 years ago when I first entered this market, and I saw that in Nigeria, specifically, where we were doing business, it was really hard for farmers to gain access to these devices, right? And these are devices that in the United States, everyone has access to freely. Almost any store you go to, you're able to buy these devices. And then on the use side, it seemed like there were gaps in supply versus demand in places where there was a lot of demand. And so really, like, one of the core reasons why we even started Easy was to allow everyone to have access to these devices. A lot of systems have been set up so that only certain individuals can enter auctions. You have to have certain certifications for that to happen. And then even as you try to trade with companies who have access to these auctions, you need to be in certain groups. You need to go to certain conferences. And so it is not accessible for everyone, especially if you don't have the means to get to these conferences or these trade shows. And an online platform that everyone has access to, we thought was the best way to democratize access to these devices. And that's kind of where I've seen things as I've been in the space.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
So
Fantastic start. G, you go.
Yeah, so that's interesting, Josh. Thanks for kicking this one off. So I come to it from the other angle, really the other end of the spectrum. As a former OEM guy, Samsung sells, and I'm not there anymore, but I still say we because I was there so long. Samsung sells a lot of different types of products, but focuses mostly on the high-end devices. So when you have a brand new smartphone that's $1,000, $1,500, that's a lot of money for most of us. But even in the US, which is a rich country, average income, we're talking about potentially spending 2% of your annual income on one device. So is it available to everyone? Not really. Probably shouldn't be. I shouldn't spend 2% of my income on a device. So even just in the US, which again is the richest country in the world, it's not really, there's not really an even access. And after the phone, you still have also to pay for the monthly fee, you have to pay the data. So even in down Western countries, more economically advanced, there is really a variety of different levels of access to this kind of technology. So you have people who buy the top, and then really people who say, it doesn't matter to me, I don't need that. I can get everything I need with a much cheaper device, or maybe even a used device. And that's really where we come in, right? All our companies, what we do day to day is making sure that we help consumers access good devices at a much cheaper price point, which is really what I think the democratization comes to.
Makes sense.
Wow. So it's really interesting to find that it's not just in emerging economies where there is a lack of access. Even in countries, more developed countries like the US, it's not as accessible as maybe we may have thought. So yes, there is definitely.
So it depends what you look for. Like my father-in-law has a flip phone that doesn't have 5G, doesn't have 4G. I think he's still on 3G for now because it's still available. And he doesn't want to pay data, right? He just wants to get the phone, the voice. Right? Could he afford it? He could. Does he want it? Does he need it? No, he doesn't. So what is the market going to provide him with?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So to that end, G, you launched the trading program at Samsung.
Yep.
What was your motive behind that? What prompted you to launch that?
How much time do we have? So yeah, at Samsung, so first off, I launched what became known as the CPO, Certified Pre-Owned, which at the time was the only OEM-backed refurbished device. Apple then copied us about 18 months later. I'm not tap on the back.
Samsung did it first.
18 months before them, yeah. Apple had tried it, but never different model, and they never put the stamp of approval. They never said, hey, it's Apple product, so it didn't really work. So we were the first one to say, let's try it. So I did that first. And then as I tried to scale that up and get more devices, more broken devices to refurbish to a Samsung CPO, we thought, well, we need to find new sources. And as Samsung, I'm not willing today to go in the secondary marketplace to buy more devices. So I need to get them in-house. How do I do that? Then at the same time, as an OEM, every 6 months, every time we had a release, I'm going to move this quickly so you see my hands more. Every release, we have to spend a lot of money on marketing to convince consumers to buy the next device. And the way most players in the market used to do back then was through what we call a BOGO, buy one, get one. So if you buy my phone, I give you one for free. It sounds great for the volume to push away, but revenue doesn't increase. It's very, very expensive for us because our cost double. And it also had side effects on the residual value, because if you're a couple, you get 2 phones, one each, great. If you are single, you get 2 phones. What do? You go on eBay, you resell at whatever price you get, right? And that's before Easy existed, right?
Right.
By the time it was eBay, and you get any price, so it kills our residual value, which has then ramifications on how much money we can actually recover from the carrier. Complex stuff. So we thought, well, we got 2 issues, right? I need more phones for my CPO, and the current marketing product available to us, marketing vector, to sell more phones, that BOGO is really expensive. So what if we do the 2 together? We do trade-in, just like the auto industry is doing, just like other, even carriers were doing trade-ins at that point. So we thought, let's do an OEM trade-in. It will be Samsung, a trade-in. So I get both benefits. And that's how we got started. So initially we did a small pilot, tried to test the waters, making sure the economics were going to play out. And it was very successful. And the cost of that marketing product ended up dropping because a trade-in is a lot more cost effective than a BOGO. And then I had my phones for my CPO, so everybody was happy. That's how we got started.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
It sounds easier now. At the time, I didn't really know what I was doing, but in hindsight,
especially from the BOGO perspective, like what an individual would do if they got 2 phones, immediately just go sell it, and how that hurts the actual value of the phone. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and so to expand on this a little bit, what carriers would come and tell us was, Mr. OEM, Samsung, your phone's residual value is very low, because they would see on eBay, like, phone is 30% of its price 6 months later.
Right.
So they would tell us, well, you have to pay us on the back end as well. So now not only did we have to pay on the front end with the marketing, the BOGO campaign, but then on the back end, we also had to effectively guarantee or support the carrier's asset price. So it was a very, very expensive proposition for us. And
how did you see?
Our brand? I mean, there was no good things coming out of it.
How did you see like the trade-in program benefit Samsung on the front end? Like, I think we're kind of going off topic here, but just out of curiosity.
And you guys will have to stop me because I'm pretty passionate about this. On the front end, so depending on how the trading is structured, but depends on what kind of attach rate you can get. We were able to get very strong attach rates up to 70% online, which means so for 100 phones we sell, 70% had a trading attached to it. We've seen this to really drive demand, drive sales, and at a cost that was, if not nil, at least very minimal compared to a BOGO. So from an OEM perspective, it was a slam dunk. And oh, by the way, Apple copied us 18 months later.
Just FYI.
I'm not Samsung anymore. Once again, even if my my mug says Samsung.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still the evil empire, you know. Samsung good guys, Apple not so much.
Yeah.
I have friends there too.
I love it.
You don't want to say that in front of Josh. He's really passionate about Apple.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Again, I have friends over there and they give me the same crap. It's fair game.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on from that, from talking around the trading programs, one term that's also very closely linked to trading programs, as well as just often used in the electronics industry, is the reverse supply chain, also sometimes called second life retailing. So for the average person who's probably on this call and has no idea what this means, what exactly does this mean? What do these terms mean for the average person? Over to you, G, because I know that this is your.
Okay, I get to it. I was going to keep us enough to Josh. Yeah. All right. So I think there are different concepts. The reverse logistics is a way to get a used product. So in our instance, we're talking about phones, but it could be clothing, could be anything. Get this back from the end consumer back to the retailer, or from the retailer back to the OEM. So it's just a way to get things back to where they came from. Then from there, once we have that device back, now we can do that second life of the phone, where really the person that got it back, so the retailer got the device back, or the OEM, and now we can try to resell it. Yeah. So that's one avenue towards that second life. The other one, of course, is Moyo, you have your old phone, you want to sell it, you sell it peer-to-peer to Josh gets it. That's also the second life, right? Effectively, this device has changed owners, still working condition, is going to be used for another 2 years. And then Josh says, yeah, I don't want this one anymore, sells it to me. Now it's the third life. We still talk about second life.
Yeah,
but that's so slightly different concept. The reverse logistics is get it back from the consumer or the retailer back to the one step before that, which is an avenue of tremendous growth. For a long time, everybody would do forward logistics. So from the OEM to the retailer to the consumer, and then from there to the dump. And what we are finding as an industry is that those used products, again, phones, TVs, clothing, whatnot, they still have value. And there's that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah.
Just because, Moyo, you don't like your phone anymore, Josh may still love it. And 2 years from now, I will still like it because I have a need. So let's not dump it. Let's not fill the landfills and kill the fishes, but let's try to reuse it. And that's the second life. So there's an economic impetus, but it's also good for the environment. So try not to destroy everything around us.
Absolutely. And without meaning to, you just touched on my next question, which I will pose to Josh, right? So Josh, I know that this forms part of your purpose at Easy. So beyond democratizing consumption, second life retailing also supports environmental sustainability by reducing e-waste, as G so well touched on. What is the current relationship between electronics and the environment, and where do we need to get to?
I think currently, right now, what we're seeing is, if we look at like supply chain shortages, we have these chip shortages as of late. Like cars are in heavy demand, and prices are skyrocketing for them. We've seen gaming consoles, the same thing, where they can't get enough out. And so what's happening is we are having to develop and like mine and take out more natural resources to build and sell these new devices. Whereas a lot of these components and parts can be found in devices that have been used in the past, and that can be reconfigured to be put into these newer devices. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of these like heavy supply chain issues, because as it stands right now, we are not utilizing these older devices parts and getting these older devices back into the market to kind of, I guess, like unhinge our need for new and other like natural resources. I think there's a long way for us to go in terms of, you know, reusing these old parts and finding sustainable ways to get these old devices back into the hands of people that need them, but also being able to strip these devices down and use those parts sustainably into newer devices that are coming out. I think there's lots of room to grow. I think COVID has kind of exposed that that part of the industry, and like we need to be pushing to be more sustainable. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so now I think we've talked a lot about the electronics marketplace, what, you know, Second Life retailing is, what are some of the ways we can reduce e-waste, you know, the fact that there is a need to democratize consumption across various markets. But what are some of the challenges that I know that the marketplace is rife with, right? So whilst there's a lot of immense potential, I'd like us to unpack some of these inefficiencies that exist, especially in the secondhand smartphone market. What are some of them what are some of the inefficiencies you've dealt with in your various capacities, and how have you resolved them? You can go, G. I see you're eager.
Yeah, I know it's a good question, and it's I can think right now of two main types of inefficiencies. The first one, to really piggyback on what Josh just mentioned. So the repair is important, right? When there's a used device, used phones, sometimes it's cracked, it's shattered, it needs to some repair. So we put a case, but it's not enough. I think the key to that will be making sure that every stakeholder, every player has an incentive interest in doing so. And today, the OEMs in particular, but even the carriers and the retailers, their incentive is to have new products come through. An OEM, they want to build new stuff, right? The carrier, they want the newer device because newer device will have a higher ARPU, which is basically a higher revenue per unit. So consumers are going to use more data on a new phone than they would on an old one. And it's a numbers game. And so carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile in the US, want us to have bigger phones, nicer phones, so that we can use more data, so they can make more money on the back end. Retailers, they want us to go in the store. So all those big stakeholders have a built-in advantage, incentive to have new phones come through all the time. Until we change that model, we will face an uphill battle. So there are things that the industry and regulators have been working against. There's right to repair laws coming on board now in the US, and the White House has issued an executive order on this. We haven't seen really the impact of that, but hopefully it's coming. I know in Europe, they are starting, and especially in France, starting to create a scale of called the repairability index. So now consumers hopefully will look at the new product and figure out how easy it is to repair, and then decide to buy the device that's easiest to repair, to hopefully then give an incentive to the OEM to create a product that's easier to repair. There's still a lot of inefficiency, and I don't have the answer yet. And nobody in the industry really has the answer. And that's something we together have to work against.
Yeah.
To your question, there's another big aspect, big inefficiency I see now, focusing more on the reverse logistics side. So Moyo, you had your old phone, you want to reset it, you don't sell it to Josh yet, you resell it to eBay or to Easy or to one of those marketplaces. They may use it, or they may just resell it to another wholesaler, right? So say you sell it on eBay and it goes to a wholesaler, that company is going to take the phone, take ownership of it, bring it back in-house through reverse logistics. And so there's a shipment here. Test it, triage it, grade it, and then resell it to another wholesaler who's going to bring it in-house. And again, doing the process here again. On average, we estimate that between 5 and 7 hands will touch that device, each of whom is going to bring it in-house, test it, triage it, grade it, store it, and resell it. So this costs time in shipping, time in handling, costs a lot of money. And those devices are assets that lose money over time to begin with. On average, a good rule of thumb is about 1% per week, depends on the age of the device, but let's use 1%. So if you use 5 different hands, right, each of them is going to take about a week. Just right there, the price of the device has dropped by 5 to 6%. On top of that, we add the cost of shipping, we add the cost of handling, etc. We estimate that from beginning to end of the value chain, the price, the value of the device has nearly halved. So now all of a sudden the overall value is halved and no one really had an incentive in getting a better solution. So again, as an industry, there's a lot we can do here. And there are things that are happening right now, and you guys have heard of blockchain. There are a few blockchains that are focused on logistics that are starting to have use cases on the reverse side of it. There's been work with, so CTIA started things in the US, some carriers, some OEMs have tried solutions, more on the P2P side. There are some other solutions. Right now, people are trying. There's no real unified solution yet. Hopefully it will happen. Idea would be to make sure that we know exactly where the device goes, who touched it, who graded it, so that the next person that handles it doesn't have to go through the whole process again. So the end value is higher. So then there's more of a commercial incentive for people to keep it live instead of saying that phone has no more value, I'm going to destroy it.
Yeah.
A lot of work to be done here. There's not going to be a solution overnight, but I think enough people are trying to find a solution that we will get there, given enough time.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh?
All right, Josh, you next need to do better now.
Let me see what I can do. Yeah, so I mean, I see it from, I guess, like a different point of view, or I guess a different angle from this space. I think like reverse logistics is a lens I don't have a lot of clarity into, but what I do see on the secondhand market side is getting these devices from these secondhand logistics partners, these people who are taking these devices back and getting them to the hands of people that need them. What we experience, I mean, it's the same story as you. There are going to be 6 to 7 people who are touching these devices. They're trying to figure out, where's the best place to get this device in order to move it next. And typically, it isn't, a straightforward path, from a wholesaler to a retail storefront to an end consumer, right? Usually something from, one international distributor to another to a broker to another international distributor to a storefront to a consumer, right? And that's one thing that we have been trying to really cut down is the number of people who need to touch a device before it gets to where it needs to go. And so I think there's a lot of fragmentation in this market, and that's just a simple result of it being mostly offline. A lot of people are, trading within WhatsApp groups or forums, which don't really, allow for everyone to kind of be in the same conversation or be aware that those devices exist at that price point and being able to purchase them and route them to that end customer. And so a lot of what we want to do, I mean, this even boils down to the first question is democratizing access or consumption, is allowing everyone to see, okay, hey, there are 500 iPhone X's in grade A condition at $280, right? And someone who is in Nigeria, someone who's in Ukraine, someone who's in Brazil can all see those devices and all purchase those devices and have equal access to them. And I think that is what will, limit some of these or remove some of these middlemen in this process that, are contributing to the decline in the value of the device, and then also, I guess, like removing value from the value chain as it passes through so many hands. And I think like that's one of the biggest inefficiencies that we've seen, fragmentation. And it has a lot, it strips a lot of value from the industry because it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's something I've seen on my end as well. So back then, when I would resell a lot of assets on auctions, and I would have people come to me often said, "Hey, G, can I do a tech haul? But let's do it off the like on the side." So I know some of them were kind of hoping they could just buy me and and make me shut up and give me back some money on the back table. Like, I don't do that, sorry. But anyway, I would tell them, like, why would I do this? I want my prices to be on the open so that the whole market can give me the fair price. Sometimes I lose. Right. On average, I will win because more information means higher value.
Right.
So that's something I've seen as well, Josh. Another point to what you mentioned, today, different countries have different networks, and devices may be optimized for a network versus another. So even within Europe, for example, where we would think, oh, Europe is kind of unified, not every country will have, not every carrier network will have the same antennas. So if I have a product, a used device that I want to resell, I may get a better value in one country versus another based on which antennas are available on that network. And when you look at it on an aggregate basis, until all those devices have a unified SKU with every antenna turned on across the world, that will limit how well we can really transact across borders. So there are some laws, of course, there is some VAT and whatnot, but beyond that, also the usability aspect is important to figure out what you can buy and how much value you can derive from a device. And that's something, again, it's one of those products, solutions that the market is going to. Slowly, the OEMs are getting more unified SKUs. Apple, I think, is doing a great job here.
Yeah.
But it is impacting the recovery side in the second life.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I love that we touched on the challenges, but also spoke about a lot of ways in which in our various capacities, we're also trying to find solutions to these problems that exist. So I think, when I think of this, I try to think about what the future holds for the electronics market as far as equalizing consumption and creating that universal access to devices, because let's face it, devices have changed the way in which we do so much, from business transactions to even just our lifestyles, right? And they've become such a huge part of our existence. So are there any more solutions that we haven't quite posed or haven't quite explored yet as far as democratizing that consumption that we should be looking to create or proffer? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one. I think one of the I think even what we're still working on now is just giving buyers or people in this space as much information as possible. And I think that's one thing that has been restricted, just in terms of access, but also just access to information. So pricing information, consistency of grading, how much is available, how much quantity is available just in the general market, etc. I've really viewed this space as commodity driven, where supply and demand dictate the price. And if you look at other commodity driven markets, so specifically like oil or looking at agriculture, you see that there are trading platforms where information is accessible to everyone. And I think that's one area in which this space really needs to grow in is access to information. And I think like it will definitely get there. There's a lot more complexity in this space than I would say agriculture for sure, as you're dealing with electronics. But access to information, I think, is something that can be achieved and will be achieved sooner rather than later. And I think that would really help to, solve a lot of problems in this space.
Mm-hmm. Josh, I like that you touched on something that Easy is actually a solution that Easy is currently proffering and even trying to better. So that's awesome. Chi, over to you.
I don't have much to add on this one. I think as an industry, we are following the overall population's appetite to try to do better, to make sure that our industry is more respectful of nature, and at the same time, I strongly believe that we need to have the right financial incentives, push the financial incentives onto the main stakeholders, the carriers, retailers, OEMs, and we are getting there.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to look like. I agree that information sharing is more than likely a critical function of that. I think right now a lot of people are trying a lot of things, and we don't have a unified solution yet, but we'll get there. My hope is we'll get there fast, but there's a lot of work there.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of work to be done.
And a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So it looks like we've got a few questions. We've come to the end of the panel discussion. So we've got a few questions from the audience. I'll read out the first question. So the first question is directed at you, Josh. So it says, Josh spoke about providing access to information to everyone globally. What are the complexities with actually getting international people to buy?
So I think complexities with international people is it's mostly logistics. So how do we get money from this country into the United States, right? So those payment railroads, and then also how do we get the devices from the United States to that country in the fastest, safest, and cheapest way, right? And I think in my experience, working in this space, it's access to information that allows for those things to happen, right? And that's something we're doing heavily at Easy. Is we're actually going out and doing the legwork to find these partners that can, transfer money from different countries into the United States, but then also working with logistics partners to export these devices in a safe and cheap way into these countries. And so I think that's the biggest bottleneck that we have seen. I think like the next that comes is simply trust, right? So people in these countries, just recognizing that, hey, like Easy is a credible business that will make sure that if I order a device on the platform, I'll actually receive them. So I think we definitely need to do a lot more work in making sure that we can service as many countries as possible. And then as our reputation grows, people should feel more comfortable purchasing through us.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'll take the next question. How do you propose, and this is directed to you both, how do you propose we solve the issue of fragmentation so as to maintain the value of the devices when they get to their consumers?
I don't know if I'll take a crack at it based on my understanding of fragmentation, and please chime in if I misunderstand here. Right now, what I view of fragmentation is there are a lot of players in the market, each of whom is competing to get the biggest slice possible. Going back to the incentives again. So I actually think right now we need fragmentation. We need more competition. And that way people are going to try to fight and get the best answer, which is going to benefit everyone. I don't know that we are in a time when we want one person, one solution across the board, because then they don't have incentive to keep on improving. As long as we don't have a solution, I want a lot of people fighting for it.
Mm.
Is that the fragmentation that Amarachi, you were asking about? Or did I misunderstand?
Mm.
I think the fragmentation she might be alluding to is, or kind of the way that I see it is you have like different vendors who, will all get the exact same phone, right? So people will have, this company will have 500 iPhone X's, this one 200, this one 300, etc. Right? But because of their different networks, they will have different prices for those devices, right? So like this vendor, he has, buyers in this channel. This seller has buyers in this channel, right? So it's a fragmented market. The buyers here don't know about the seller here. The seller here doesn't know about the buyers there, right? So there is like a lack of information throughout the industry, right?
Okay, so
and what happens is, so what happens is this buyer over this seller over here, because he has, this channel of buyers, he may be selling his devices for, $20 more, right? So he's selling his iPhone X's for, let's say, $320. This seller over here is selling his for $300, right? Mm-hmm. This guy sells out, right? And then these guys are kind of price gouged on their devices. So further up on the value chain, you see that, the people that bought from this buyer all have higher priced devices than the buyer.
Did we lose Josh for a second?
Yeah, I think so. I thought that was me. Okay, yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Lost you for a few seconds.
When did I cut out?
I think you were explaining how the different buyers, the different pools were going to get better recovery than others. You could have for like maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that makes a lot of sense. I have good news though in that space, in that sense. 20 years ago, early 2000s, I have a lot of friends who started back then doing the wholesaling, buying and selling assets. And at the time, they could make 20, 50, 100% margin on assets because the information was really broken and there was no real access to that data. Over time, all the wholesalers have seen their margins really been squeezed to just a few points. And today, I have a lot of folks coming to me asking me for sources of devices. How do I find products? And they all say, oh, I can resell. Reselling is easy. I am supply constrained. But what we've seen is the margins have really zeroed in. They are just a few points now, which suggests to me that this problem you identified, Josh, it's still a real issue, but it's not nearly as big as it used to be. Prices are a lot more even through, over the whole value chain and depending on which places you go to. So there are still some opportunities, but not nearly as much. And that's why you find a lot of the wholesalers pivoting in strategy and trying to create more programs to add value as opposed to just buying and selling. The days of getting really rich on that are gone, thankfully. Not for them, but thankfully for everybody else.
No, the space has definitely improved quite a bit.
Okay, so it looks like this is our last question. What do you think of the growth of this industry as people are starting to buy new devices less to conserve the environment?
I think as we start seeing a shift of people buying more used devices, the value for these devices will be further retained, right? So as there's more demand for these devices, the price of them will go up, and I think which is a benefit for retailers, carriers, and incentivizes them as well to continue selling these used devices within their own stores. And so I think it's a great shift that we're seeing. We've seen that the used smartphone market is growing almost 5 times faster than the new smartphone market. And so there's a lot of growth potential in this space. There's an incredible amount. And I think it's great just, seeing how we've been supply constrained with some critical parts to these electronics. And keeping these devices out of landfills is, I think, what everyone wants at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think also there's a confluence of factors. So consumers are wanting to keep the products longer. They wanting a better price, so they are more likely to look at used phones. Also because they become educated in that and they realize it's an option for them. From the OEM perspective, one thing we tracked a lot was the upgrade cycle, how fast consumers would keep their first product before upgrading. And when I joined the industry, it was about 18 months, maybe 20 months. Now it's going on 36 months, 38 months. So people are keeping their first product longer, in spite of all those trading programs being so aggressively pushed out. And again, I'm a trading guy, so that's my number one job, how to do trading, to increase that upgrade cycle. But at the same time, I know that as an industry, we are losing that battle because people keep their first device longer. And then they keep the second one longer. And then often now devices are getting a standard fourth life. And then you have the regulatory bodies saying, I need the OEM to give software updates for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years now. So it all comes together to make sure that devices are being used longer, even if it's not in the same first hands. Over the life of that product, it stays longer active and being used. And I think it's a great way, and I'm going to take your job for a second. I see Amarach's follow-up question on that. And is it possible stakeholders are able not to concentrate on producing more? Because so the incentive is to make money, of course, and today they make money by selling the device. Yeah. But that's where leasing comes in. And if I just rent out my device and I pay a fee for the service, well, now I don't have to buy a new device. I can just use the same one and pay a little bit every month. So it's easier for me to afford a nicer phone. So the OEM now, or the carrier, is happy because there's an expensive phone in the market and they're getting money every month on that. So it's changing the model where you don't, as an OEM, you don't make the money upfront, but you make it over time. And there are some complexities in terms of accounting. How do you reconnect the revenue, for example? But it's possible and it's happening to a large extent. In the US, T-Mobile a little bit, and Sprint also was doing this, the leasing program, making sure that those phones would be paid over time. And then when you upgrade, well, you just extend the life of that lease. And the used phone goes elsewhere, but at the very least, in the meantime, somebody was incentivized to keep that product longer online. So I think it's possible. I think there are some models suggesting that it's going there. Not everybody has done that yet, but that's also what makes a market. Josh, what do you think? Actually, Moyo, you know what? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, Josh. We saw you nodding, and it seemed like you had something to say. So I agree with G.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think they're definitely becoming more. They're definitely a lot more incentives that they're using to get people to purchase new phones, especially like leasing was something that even I was doing for a long time, where you just kind of purchase a phone and kind of finance it, and then trade it in the next year, and then upgrade to a new phone. So I think that was a great way of doing it. But I mean, at the end of the day, like even the phone that I had leased ends up becoming a used phone, right? Which then enters the market. And then the same question remains is, how do you make sure that that phone that I traded in gets to someone that needs it, right? And that they can get it at a good price, right? So I think like the incentives that people or these companies are using on the front end is definitely great and incentivizes the customer, but the phone will still have value even when it's traded in. And how do we, get that phone to retain its value when it's used by in its second life?
But what I think our industry needs to do is keep looking at the auto industry. Basically, they have faced all our issues, but 20 years before. So when I built that CPO model, my boss and I did that. And clearly, I wasn't the only one working on this. We looked directly at the auto industry. Like they have the first CPO certified pre-owned. And I think it's the same for leasing. Auto industry has done leasing for a long time. They've never done a BOGO, right? Autos don't do BOGOs. You buy one car, you don't get a second one.
Right.
What you see in the auto industry today is I'm going to speak for the US. That's the example I know best. The shops, they have basically three revenue incomes. You have sales of new cars, you have sales of used cars, and then you have the maintenance. And it's roughly a third each in terms of revenue. And profit-wise, more and more the profit comes from the maintenance. So what prevents us from doing the same for consumer electronics? Really nothing. We should do that. Now, if I lease a brand new car, I keep it for 2 years. I may have to pay an overage because I used it more than my contract said, but fine, I do that. And then my lease comes out, I can get a new car, or I can buy my leased car and at a discounted price. Either way, now that car has another driver. And then at some point, that car is going to be resold in the US, or maybe driven down by the border in Mexico and ends its life somewhere in Central and South America, where consumers still want this vehicle that still runs great, not the latest, but that's fine. They are okay with that. It does what they need. It's a cheaper price. And we can do the same thing for consumer electronics. And I think we are going there. And so now the auto industry, they make money on the sale of the new car, but their dealerships make money on the sale of the used and certainly make a lot of money on the maintenance. What prevents an OEM today in the US to do the same for phones? Nothing. I think we need to go there.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
Awesome.
Okay. Moyo, back to you now.
All right. With that, looks like we've come to the end of this webinar. I think this was a really insightful conversation around, how better to equalize consumption within the electronics marketplace, as well as solving inefficiencies and even some futuristic solutions that we should be looking to drive. And I'd like to thank our speakers, G, Josh, for being here today. I know that an hour of your time on a very busy Thursday morning is a lot to ask. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all our guests who have joined and participated and asked questions on here. Thank you for joining our conversation today, and we hope to see you very, very soon. With that, I'm happy to close out this session.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, thank you, Moyo. And thank you, G. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.